Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 16th of February. So coming to the first article. Now this being a Friday, this is the customary yes, no and it's complicated article. But the question yet again is very important this time. It is that should Supreme Court proceedings be live streamed? Now this is a very pertinent debate and you can find this question as a direct question in your mains paper. So that is the relevance. Now coming to the context that why this question is being raised. This question is being raised because there is a petition which has been filed by advocate Indra Jaising, which is requesting that the Supreme Court should allow live streaming of all its proceedings. So that is the context. Now coming to the discussion, the first aspect is with regards to the opinion is yes, that live streaming should be allowed in the Supreme Court. Now coming to the justification, the first point is that historically this has been an ideology that the courts should be an open court system. For example, even Kautilya had advocated it. Not only that, you should know that traditionally in India, it is the panchayats which have been performing the function of judiciary, and even the panchayats were held as an open court. So if the spirit is something that is there within our system for a long time, then why shouldn't we advocate it even now? And even the Indian legal system is based on the concept of an open court. So that is something that is analyzed with regards to the historical perspective. Now coming next is to the physical limitation. Now you need to know that even though the present judiciary is based on a principle of open courts, this is something that is having some physical limitations of infrastructure and also of location. For example, there is only one Supreme Court in India. So how many people can actually come to visit the Supreme Court even once in their lifetime? So that is one question. So if the proceedings are live streamed, then it will ensure that a large population gets an access to the Supreme Court, at least virtually. So that is something that is important here. Another thing is with regards to technology in judiciary. Now here you need to know that judiciary has been open to the use of technology. For example, judiciary is advocating for digitization. It has been promoting online records of all the cases, and also there is a provision for filing FIR online. There is an automated system of case rotation. So all of these systems are there within the judiciary. So if all of these are being followed, then why shouldn't the judiciary even look into the matter of live streaming and welcome it? So that is something that is important. Another thing which is very important here is with regards to the cardinal principle of justice. This you should anyway know, you can use it also in your ethics paper. The cardinal principle of justice is that justice should not only be done, justice should also be seen to be done. So that is something that is important, that if justice should also be seen to be done, then why not make it more transparent and why not allow live streaming of all the proceedings? So that is something that has been analyzed. Now some issues are also what has been analyzed in this argument. For example, there is a criticism against live streaming where it says that it can hamper the privacy. Now you need to know in the Supreme Court there are some personal cases also which are discussed where family members are involved or some other matters are there. So here the author is making a case that in such matters where privacy is a concern, in such cases it can have a norm, there can be a rule that live streaming will not be allowed. But definitely in some other cases which are largely of a public interest, which are some national issues, is something, in those cases live streaming is something that can be of great aid. Some examples is what has been given, and I would suggest that you should make a note of these examples. For example, the case of entry of women to the Sabrimala temple, or the case which is analyzing the scope of right to choice of one's food, or the case of constitutionality of Aadhaar scheme, or the legality of section 377 of the IPC. All of these cases are cases of national interest and they are pending in the Supreme Court. So if the proceedings of these cases are live streamed, then indeed it is going to be a big boost to transparency in judiciary, and it will make the entire nation a participant in the proceedings. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another case is with regards to Parliament. Now Parliament has been open to live streaming through the Lok Sabha TV and the Rajya Sabha TV. I'm sure some of you are following these TVs, some of these channels. So through these channels, the proceedings in the Parliament are being live streamed, and this is since the year 2004. So if the parliamentary proceedings are live streamed, why not the judicial proceedings also be live streamed? So that is one case. Also globally, this is a practice followed in some countries. For example, in Australia it is followed. Also in Canada it is followed, and also the International Court of Justice is following this system of live streaming. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another aspect is with regards to the benefits which live streaming of judicial proceedings can have. For example, it is going to be a big boost to right to information. Now, time and again, it has been raised, questions are raised, that the judiciary has always championed the cause of the right to information, but when it comes to enforcing right to information on its own institutions, then the judiciary has been lax. So in that regard also, it is going to be of a huge benefit if live streaming is done. So that is something that is important. Another thing is it will help the citizens get an access to justice. So that is something that has been analyzed. Also, it will help build the right perception, which is not there against judiciary. At present, you should know, you've discussed in many of our previous discussions also, that judiciary is facing a crisis of credibility. There is a trust erosion which is happening with the judiciary. So this is something that can be restored if there are live streaming of the judicial proceedings. Also, it will help in educating the common man on how the judiciary functions. Also, there is a need to avoid the multiple versions or the wrong projections of often the facts and judgments given by the judiciary or given by the Supreme Court. There is also a menace of fake news and faulty reporting which has come. So all of these issues can be redressed if there is live streaming. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to some issues regarding technical glitches. Now here the author says that definitely there are some claims that there can be some technical glitches in this, but definitely these can be resolved with some proper efforts and proper guidelines. So that is something that has been advocated here. Now, what are these technical glitches? We will discuss in the no aspect. Now, coming next to the issue of courts becoming a spectacle. Now, this is one of the biggest criticism to live streaming. Now, here the author says that this is a false criticism because the judges are acting on merit and the judges are working very hard to ensure quality judgments. So this case of judiciary becoming a spectacle is not something that is valid. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to some other issues, some other criticisms for live streaming is what this editorial has addressed. For example, the criticism is that there is a lack of infrastructure in the judiciary, and also the judiciary is already very overburdened, and it might become difficult in deciding how to implement all of these live streaming processes. So that is something, those are some technical and implementation issues is what the author has talked about. So here she says that these kind of questions are something that can be ironed out, and this should not be a reason for defeating transparency in judiciary. So that is something that has been advocated. Another thing is that technology has acted as a game changer in almost all the sectors. So why not even in judiciary, technology should be leveraged to act as a game changer for judiciary and restoring the credibility of judiciary, which at present is under crisis. So this is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is that definitely this will ensure an empowerment of the masses. They will feel more connected to judiciary. They will feel more educated about judiciary. So definitely it is a matter of empowerment. So that is something that has been advocated. Now coming to the second set of arguments, which is that no, live streaming in judiciary should not be allowed. Now one thing I would like to mention that definitely in the yes argument we have approximately 13 points. And in the no argument, we have only 5 points. But this does not mean that the yes argument is an absolutely valid one. So that is something that you should make a note of. It is not about the number of points, rather the value of points. So that is something that is important. Now, the first issue is with regards to a comparison between the legislative, executive and the judiciary. Now, these are the three wings of the government and each have a different role, a different function. So a parallel cannot be drawn within these three wings of the government. So that is something that you need to know. Now, one thing that is important is that the executive, for example, is having much more scrutiny as compared to the parliament. For example, if a minister has spoken anything in the parliament, then he cannot be held liable for that. No judicial proceedings can be conducted against any member of the parliament for his views expressed within the ambits of the parliament. So some protections is what is given under the legislative. These protections might not be restored or might not be given to an MP if he is acting in the position of maybe a minister. So the executive does not have the powers which the legislative has. So this is some difference that you need to understand. Similarly, when we come to the judiciary, the author here makes a claim that judiciary is something that is not subordinate either to the people or to the legislative. Judiciary is entirely an independent body. Despite the fact that the people are sovereign in a democracy, judiciary is merely a representative of the people and it is not subordinate to the people. And judiciary is only subordinate to the rule of the law and the constitution. So in that respect, this idea of live streaming judicial proceedings and making it subject to the people's analysis and scrutiny is something that has been criticized. So that is something that is vital. Another thing is with regards to the impact that live streaming is going to have on the judges. Now, here a case has been made that it might happen that the judges become conscious of public opinion and this might impact the spirit of impartiality. For example, in the case of Nirbhaya, what happens is that in such issues, there's a huge amount of public anger against a particular case. However, judges are supposed to remain neutral in such matters. That is the entire core and crux of impartiality, and also it is for this reason that judges are supposed to maintain a certain degree of seclusion. Now, what might happen is that if there is going to be a live streaming of these videos, then often of the judicial proceeding, then what might happen is that the judges might become conscious of the public opinion that is being generated against them, and in such a scenario, the judges might not be able to give a completely impartial judgment. Not only that, even the individuality of judges may sometimes become a matter of public debate. Also, there is a practice of oral proceedings, and oral culture is something that is prevalent in Indian judiciary. Sometimes the judges make some oral remarks which is not something that is in line with the formal notings of these judges, and all of these practices is something that are going to be hampered if there is live streaming. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to the impact which is going to happen on the lawyers. Now here, the lawyers may start publicizing themselves through their address to the bench. Now, actually, you should know that the role of the lawyers is that they have to explain a particular case to the judge to get a particular judgment. Now, it might happen that diverging from this cardinal principle of cardinal basis of practice of law, lawyers might not only be addressing the benches of the judges but also the public in general. So this is something that might make the entire argument made by the lawyers something that is dispassionate and not very expertise oriented. So that is one analysis which has been drawn, that it is going to impact not only the judges but also the lawyers. So that is one issue. Another thing is with regards to some technicalities is what is important. For example, in this profession of judiciary, expertise is something that is warranted, and judicial proceedings being live streamed will hamper this aspect of expertise. So that is something that is important. As I mentioned before, in the cases of judges also, that some oral observations is what is made by the judges, and this is merely an informal expression. Now, this oral expression or sometimes by the judges can become a cause of some irresponsible debates in the news channels. It could be overhyped. So all of those issues is something that is the technical aspect of it, which might make difficult the case for live streaming of judicial proceedings. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another very good solution here is that instead of live streaming, what can be advocated is that audio video recordings is something that should be done. Now, and this the author says here is going to be a better option for administration of justice. Now, in this regard, you need to know that already in the Pradyuman Bisht case Pradyuman Bisht versus the Union of India 2017, this was a judgment which the Supreme Court had given. In this judgment, the Supreme Court had directed all the high courts to ensure CCTV cameras and audio video recordings in the subordinate courts. Now, this is something that can be expanded even to the high courts and the Supreme Courts. And not only that, these audio video recordings under some proper guidelines can be released under the ambit of the right to information based on privacy concerns, and some regulation and some norms should be followed. So this is one solution which I would advocate you should give in your answers if there is a solution that is sought. Now, generally in such kind of open-ended debates, a solution is not going to be expected out of you, but if it is, then definitely this is going to be a very good solution. So this is something that you can replicate. Another aspect is with regards to the complicated view. Now, the first view here is that of grandstanding. Now, this is something that is common, that both judges and lawyers will have a tendency to take a grandstand, and this will might cause them to play to the gallery of public opinion, which is something that is going to defeat the principle of an open judiciary. So this is the first argument. Another very important argument is with regards to the uniqueness of the Supreme Court of India. Now, there might be hardly any Supreme Court in the entire world which is going to be as burdened as the Supreme Court of India. We have only one Supreme Court for a country as large as India. So in that regard, you need to know that Supreme Court is already very much burdened. So often there is a tendency that to do away with the large number of cases, that a number of cases in the Supreme Court are not taken up very formally, and often the Supreme Court practices are largely based on oral hearings. So this kind of matter is something that is going to be defeated if there is a live streaming. So that is something that is important. Another thing here is that some other suggestions is what has been given, that some other fundamental reforms can first be adopted, and then this idea of live streaming can further in future be explored. So what are these ideas? For example, greater reliance on written briefs, page limits for the briefs and judgments, also some time limit for oral arguments. Now, primarily the criticism is that the Supreme Court proceedings are not very organized, and often they become difficult for future references because the written briefs that these judgments are giving, they are inadequate. So this is something that is a criticism. So to counter this, some reforms is what has been suggested, that these written briefs can be more elaborate, they can be more efficient. So that is what should be ensured, rather than simply jumping to the idea of live streaming. So indeed, this is also a welcome suggestion. The topic, as I mentioned, is very, very important for you. So that's the relevance. Coming to the next topic, gem of a scam. Now the context here is with regards to the recent Punjab National Bank scam of rupees 11,500 crore is what has happened. And this is probably the biggest scam to hit a public sector bank. And Punjab National Bank, you need to know, is the second largest public sector bank in the country. So indeed, this is a scam of scams. This is a very important scam for this year. So that is something that is important. Now, some details is what you need to know, that this is a scam which has occurred due to a collusion of the bank officials at a single branch in South Mumbai, single branch of the Punjab National Bank. So that is where this has happened. And the person who was involved is the billionaire diamond merchant Nirav Modi. So that is something that you need to know. Now coming to some background is what is vital. An issue of letters of undertakings is something that you need to understand about. Now, what is a letter of undertaking? A letter of undertaking is a kind of a guarantee which a bank is going to give to its client. Guarantee which a bank is giving to its client. Now, what happens in this guarantee is that suppose a person comes to a bank, Punjab National Bank, and it says that it wants a loan from this bank, but this loan it doesn't want in India. It wants this loan in a foreign country for starting up a business in that particular foreign country. Now, because of the limitation that Punjab National Bank might not have a branch in that foreign country, say X, Punjab National Bank will issue a letter of undertaking, which in short is an LOU. And with this LOU, the Punjab National Bank will say that it is the guarantor of this client. Based on the credibility of this client in India, Punjab National Bank is willing to take his guarantee for the loan that this person is taking in a foreign country. So in a foreign country, some other bank, for example, the Axis Bank is there in a foreign country, is going to give this person a loan based on this letter of undertaking. So this is what had happened, that the person accused here, Mr. Nirav Modi, he took letters of undertakings from the Punjab National Bank for 3 of his companies, and these companies went on to take loans in foreign countries from different banks like the Axis Bank, the Allahabad Bank, the SBI Bank. And these loans were taken to the tune of 11,500 crore, and now he has defaulted on these loans. And now it is the Punjab National Bank, which being the guarantor, will have to pay for these loans. So that is the entire scam. Now, what are the issues which are involved? The first issue is with regards to a heightened scrutiny and vulnerability. Now, first and foremost, you need to understand that already the public sector banks are facing the problem of rising non-performing assets. So they are already under a huge scrutiny and a huge scam. Despite this heightened scrutiny, this scam has happened and it has not been reported for a long time. So that is one cause of concern. Another thing is that, as I mentioned, it is a scam which has originated from a single branch of this bank, and only few banking officials have colluded. So are the banks in India so vulnerable that only a single branch and few people can bring a scam of this degree? That is something that needs to be analyzed. Already, questions on the functioning of public sector banks is something that is very important in the present time. So this further raises the issues on the vulnerability of these banks. That is one issue. Now, as I've discussed before also, the major question here is of public trust. People have lost their trust in the public sector banks. The rising NPAs is also a problem which is often attributed to the loose governance within these public sector banks. And now this scam, and also in the backdrop of this weakening public trust, what is rising is the trend of cryptocurrencies. Even bitcoins has emerged because of this. So all of this is something that is linked, and you need to analyze that in that respect. Another thing is with regards to recapitalization. Now here you need to know that the government has recently introduced a program of recapitalizing these 21 public sector banks, and the package here is 1 lakh crore is something that the government has set aside for this recapitalization program. Now, understanding the intensity of this issue of recapitalization, here you need to know that this is a major concern, because if you take the budget of Manrega, it is 40,000 crore. So compared to that, if you see this budget, the sum of 1 lakh crore is huge, and especially for a country that is a resource constrained country like India, this is a huge sum. So already this issue was a debatable one, and now if this such kind of a scam is what is happening, then this is indeed going to be much more important. For example, the government was envisaging 5,473 crore for the Punjab National Bank under the recapitalization program. Now, even if this entire sum is given, the losses is something that cannot be mended, and not only that, the capital adequacy ratio of this bank under the Basel III norms is not going to be met. So what is the government going to do? Now, is it going to again pay more 5,000 crore rupees to compensate for this loss? So this is something that you need to understand. This is a major concern. Another analysis is with regards to the core banking solution. Now, the core banking solution is the central ledger of the bank through which all the transactions are made. Now here you need to know that in this case, the core banking solution was circumvented. So this firstly raises a question on the policy of digital payment economy, which the government has been promoting. That is one analysis. Another thing is that several private sector banks have been complaining that it is the core banking solution which was weak which is generally weak in all the public sector banks, and this is the reason for this particular scam to have happened. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to the conflicts within the banks. Now all these other banks, that is the Axis Bank, the Allahabad Bank, they are accusing the Punjab National Bank for issuing this letter of undertaking irresponsibly. But even the Punjab National Bank is further criticizing these banks, and it is saying that even if this issue was there was a improper letter of undertaking, then these banks at least should have cross-checked. They should have seen that the transaction was not being made by the core banking solution, and it was being made through some another channel. So this blame game is something that is an unhealthy precedent within these banks. So that is something that has been analyzed. Now, another analysis which has been given in this particular editorial is for the need for an efficient inquiry within this issue. And this inquiry here, the editorial discusses, should be done by the RBI. It should be under the RBI, and it should go into the bottom of the systemic lapses which have happened, and it should fix accountability across the chain of command. And it is only if this is going to happen, then the trust of the citizens is going to be restored. Another issue that is important here is with regards to the banker-borrower nexus, which is time and again emerging. It has emerged even in the case of several NPAs. So that is something that you need to know. This is a major problem facing the economy, and it's a major corruption issue. That is the banker-borrower nexus. That is something that is important. That is the relevance here. Now, article indeed is very, very important. Scam will be relevant. Some future developments in this regard is also that is going to be vital. So coming to the next article now, a deepening crisis. Now the context here is with regards to improving education sector by focusing primarily on the teacher education. So that is the context. Now one thing about this editorial and this entire discussion, the context. Now teacher education definitely is the very important component of the education sector, but that is not the only component. So this article is important in giving one additional point, but this is a specific article. It is not an all-encompassing article on education, so it should be viewed from that perspective. Now coming to the issues that have been analyzed, the first issue is with regards to spending on education. Now here the editorial discusses that in the year 1966, a commission was formed, that is the Kothari Commission. And this commission had recommended that on the education sector, the government should spend approximately 6% of the GDP. Now, at that point of time, the government was facing several challenges. The years of 1960s was very, very stressful for India. India was faced with famines. There was a challenge of food security. There were two wars, the 1962 China War as well as the 1965 Pakistan War. So at that point of time, India couldn't ensure this target of 6% of the GDP. However, even today, this target is something that is unmet. So that is the criticism here. Today, at present, the government spends approximately less than 3% of the GDP on the education sector. So that is the first analysis. Another analysis is with regards to the rising demand. Now, here the author has said that in India, there is a change in the social climate and the value of education is something that the society recognizes. So in this respect, there has been a rising demand for education. However, the problem is that despite this rising demand, education has not been an issue of a major national concern. And this is something that is important, and each year this is visible in the budget because the resources allocated to the education sector are not rising. So that is one important analysis that has been made. Another thing is with regards to the issue of teacher education. Now, as I mentioned, teacher education will be the bedrock of any education sector. So this is something that is very weak in India. It is not focused upon. Then there was a commission under Justice J.S. Verma, under late Justice J.S. Verma now. And this commission had highlighted some problems with regards to teacher education system in the country. For example, there is an issue of corruption in the regulatory framework for teacher training programs and colleges. This regulatory framework was set up in the year 1990s. Not only that, there is a problem of rampant commercialization and privatization in teacher education. Also, there are some rigid bureaucratic controls is what has been highlighted. Another thing is that there is no possibility of an academic growth for teacher education. So all of these issues is what had been highlighted by the J.S. Verma Commission. Even some recommendations in this regard were given, but these recommendations is something that have not been implemented. So that is something that is important here. Now, one analysis here is that there is a proposal to ensure a 4-year integrated program which should have a graduation along with a B.Ed program. However, the government at present is unwilling to fund this program. So this is one criticism against the government. And this program, if it is to be implemented, it will again largely depend upon the private sector, and this private sector is highly exploitative. It does not maintain the quality and standards. So all of those issues will continue, and the problem of teacher education will again continue. Another analysis with regards to teacher education is the role of higher education in teacher education. So this is some important parallel which has been drawn. Here the author in the editorial says that for ensuring better teacher education, higher education is something that needs to be focused on. At present, you should know that the right to education is limited it does not expand to higher education. It is up till 8th class only. So that is something that you need to know here. For example, if a teacher is there teaching for nursery students, then in that case, the teacher should have a knowledge of the psychological aspects of the student. For example, a teacher is teaching a primary class, then in that case, the teacher should have knowledge of some bilingual skills, because the teacher has to teach another language other than the mother tongue. So there, that knowledge will be vital. If the teacher is teaching some secondary classes, some senior classes, then in that case, a knowledge about science and labs and all of these things is what is vital. So that is something that has been analyzed, that higher education should be strengthened, and this in turn will strengthen teacher education. So that is vital. Another thing is with regards to an issue of privatization in education. Now here an analysis has been drawn that, as I mentioned before also, that after independence there were budgetary constraints on the government, and as a result of which the government favored privatization of education. But this is something that is not an issue today. And today, the major crisis which the educational sector is facing is because of rampant privatization and improper regulation. Quality standards is what has not been maintained. So that is something that is important. Another analysis is with regards to some long-term perspectives. Now here the editorial discusses that the long-term national economic interest and some social goals is what the country should focus upon. So that is something that has been analyzed in this particular editorial. Indeed, the editorial is important from one perspective of teacher education, and this point should become a part of your analysis on any discussion on education sector. So that is important here. Now coming to the next article. The context here is with regards to the Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is on a visit to India. So with this, in this context, the India-Canada relations is something that has been analyzed here. So that is what is the importance. Now coming first and foremost to the first aspect between India and Canada relations is with regards to India's diaspora. Now here you need to know that the Indian diaspora in Canada is approximately 3.6% of the Canadian population, and not only that, this diaspora is a very qualitative diaspora. It is a well-educated, affluent and politically sensitive diaspora in Canada. Approximately 19 persons are there of Indian origin are in the House of Commons in Canada. So that is the relevance of the diaspora there. Another aspect which is important with regards to the India-Canada bilateral relation is the Khalistan issue. Now you need to know that Khalistan issue is something that is still prevalent in Canada because the community on the diaspora is largely the Sikh community, and this issue there is a political issue. So for that matter, Khalistan issue is important, and often this takes the tune of some anti-India activities within Canada. So this is a major criticism or an irritant between the relations. Another thing is that the Ontario Provincial Assembly has recently adopted a resolution which called the 1984 anti-Sikh riots as a genocide. So this is another irritant which is there within the relations, bilateral relation. Also, Prime Minister Trudeau himself recently visited a gathering which had on display the flags of Khalistan. Now in the previous times in Canada, the Prime Ministers have restrained from going into such kind of gatherings, but this was a different step where the Prime Minister himself visited such a gathering. So this is another issue which has set some bad tone between the relationship. So that is something that you need to know. Another issue is with regards to a ban on entry to Gurudwaras. Now this was a ban that was imposed in Canada for the entry of Indian officials to the Canadian Gurudwaras. Now this is something that was largely criticized even within Canada by a section of the Indian diaspora within Canada. And it was said that this is against the liberal, inclusive and benign tenets of the Sikh faith itself. So this is another irritant which is there. Another thing is with regards to the migration rules. Now this is some important analysis. You need to know that Canada is one such rare country which still has very friendly migration rules, and especially in an era where countries like the UK and the US are now adopting very protectionist measures. So definitely this is something that is a positive in the relationship as India will seek greater migration to Canada. So that is something that you need to know here, and this is especially very important for educational migration. Many students from India are going to Canada to study. Not only that, after they complete their studies, a 4-year visa is something that Canada government gives to these students to ensure that these students can be employed within Canada itself. So that is something that is a good step. Another thing which is important in the relations is with regards to the economy. Now, at present, Canadian investment within India's stock markets is something that has increased. Not only that, both the countries are envisaging a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Also, they are envisaging an investment promotion and protection agreement which could be signed between those two countries. So as yet they have not been signed, but it is being proposed that they are underway. They should be signed. And if these agreements are signed, then it will also open the service sector between these two countries, and this is something that is very much in India's interest. Many countries are willing to sign these agreements only for the goods and not for the services sector. So Canada is going to be one exception who's going to allow even the service sector to be open. So this is something that is going to be a major boost to the relations between India and Canada. Also, what is important is the 3 E's between India and Canada. One is economy, which we've discussed. The other is education. Again, we've discussed that. The third E is energy. So this is something that is important, that India is importing large amounts of uranium from Canada. Not only that, even oil and gas reserves is something that Canada has, and India is importing that. And in the future, Canada can have a major role in ensuring the energy security of India. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another analysis is with regards to the scope for deepening the partnership. Now there is huge scope in areas like the information technology sector, the science and technology sector, clean and green technology sector, aviation sector, outer space sector. Cold climate warfare is something that is important. Cyber security is a zone. Counter-terrorism is an arena. Tourism is an arena. So all of these areas are something that have been mentioned, and you should make a note of these areas. They mentioned here. So that is what is the relevance of this particular editorial. Indeed, Canada-India relations can be asked, though it is not a very much in news kind of a relation, but definitely it should be there covered in your international relations part. So that is the relevance. Now, based on today's discussion, please try and attempt these questions within a word limit of 150 words. With this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow.